Hey, Exponential family, this is Myron and Ralph again for the practical multiplication conversation. We have been, excited about the conversations we've been having with leaders from across the country. And today is no different. We have a friend that is doing and leading some pretty cool things that you're actually going to have to get out your notebook and grab some coffee because today's conversation around the next generation is going to encourage you. Ralph, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. I'm on vacation, having a good time, just hanging out with my wife. We're in the desert.
Those exponential people are crazy. They want you to host stuff on your vacation. I just don't understand that. Anyway, we do have a friend. His name's Ed Kang, and we're going to just first start out today's conversation. Ed, just introducing yourself. Tell us who you are, what you're leading, and then maybe one cool thing God has said to you in the last 36 hours.
Oh, man. Hi, everybody. It's an honor to be here. Really neat to be able to do something like this over Zoom, and I feel like I should just ask these guys a lot of questions and learn, but I guess I'm the one that's supposed to be featured today. So, gosh, where do I begin? So personally, I started out in bivocational collegiate ministry, just a guy out of college, just discipling guys on campus. I happened to have been living in the Bay Area, and there's a church at Berkeley with a lot of Berkeley students, and then it kind of grew to a point where we started planting churches, and I started to lead out in that in the early 90s, and been there since, and been sending out teams since then. Boy, to past 36 hours, what has God been saying to me? Well, I mean, one thing is I was doing my daily devotions in Isaiah 40, and he says, like look at the stars, who created all these? And like Ralph, I happen to be on vacation, so if I turn that way, I'm looking at the Potomac River in Maryland, where cicadas are about to come in like a week or two, so I'm going to run away from that. But and I thought, man, like how much we neglect asking the who question whenever we see a tree or something. It's like who created all these? And just from creational realities to become devotional and grateful. And I was really hit by that, how I'm so focused on tasks and even the mission that I know I sound like St. Francis of Assisi or something, but there's a source of devotion and worship and gratitude there that I felt really convicted that I was neglecting. So yeah.
That's amazing, man. I was checking you out online. I see some really cool things happening. Tell us about how the story began in 1981 for Ed Kang.
I was a freshman at UC Berkeley. And during those days, I'm Korean American, and I'm not very culturally attuned to my Koreanness. I was fourth grade when I immigrated, but I'm bicultural, I'm bilingual, and in '81. Throughout the land, there was the first beginnings of the second generation Korean Americans, second generation Asian Americans who had cultural barrier and linguistic barrier with the parental generation. And there's something about the intensity of the immigrant church that I cherished and wanted dearly to kind of plant into the next generation, and realized that I was one of the few who could do that. Like literally, I looked around. There's really not that many people who could lead out in the second generation. And so, just by accident of history and birth, like I found myself one of the older ones in the next crop of English-speaking Asian Americans. And so that was our thing on the Berkeley campus. And then I guess we realized, wow, this is like such a narrow niche. Nobody's looking at this. It's not on anybody's radar. And if we're going to experience some of the things that we were experiencing on the Berkeley campus, or we want other people at other campuses to experience this. So because that powerful experience of having a bunch of that group be present on a campus, and we realized like, wow, we don't have to like go find them. They're all on campus somewhere. And so that started our sort of church planting vision, although we didn't know to call it that back then.
So, Ed, we were talking a little bit earlier, and I had asked you a question because I had a little experience with the Korean church in Los Angeles. I met a couple of younger pastors that were trying to plant churches, and they were getting pushback over the issues of tradition, and that what they were doing was violating the churches that already exist, and they aren't big enough, and why would you start another church because of all that? But you experienced a different kind of pushback a little bit. Tell us about that, because that's a cultural thing that probably is a little bit more a product of Asian culture in an immigrant situation. But I think our listeners, and we got somebody on from Argentina today, they're going to want to hear some things that are, a little bit out of the box for them.
Yeah, so the pushback that you referred to, Ralph, we experienced that plenty, and I think that's sort of part of the reason why I think we started to realize, wait, we need to reach everybody. If you're overly targeting a narrow niche, and somebody else comes into town targeting that niche, like there is that sense of feeling threatened and like, look, there isn't enough to go around for the both of us. Like, why are you here? Why don't you go over there? And we see that kind of petty territorialism everywhere. So pretty soon in our journey, we realized, no, we need to reach the whole campus. Right now, in our system-wide, outside of California, because California, a lot of the universities are actually plurality Asian. A lot of the UCs, they're more Asians than Caucasians or any other group. But outside of California, we've been seeing majority non-Asian. So definitely that whole shift is beginning to happen for our tribe. But the pushback that we got from the parents, and it is Asian, but then more and more it's everybody too. It's careerism. You send your children to these good schools and you pay, an arm and a leg for tuition. And then, they get mixed up with some fanatical church, and next thing they're talking about missions or church planting, and that's very threatening for the parents. And so we've gotten a lot of family strife, a lot of discouragement from the young people who want to be, flat out for God, and we're not going to starve. But particularly the immigrant generation, they're still in very much survival mode, even though reality might be that they can kind of relax a little bit on that. And so we get a lot of family persecution of our young guys, and as well as me personally.
So you kind of describe yourself as a 1.5 generation. Take us through the cycle of what happens to an immigrant culture in terms of post-immigration. You got, in Japan, Issei, Nisei, Sansei, Yonsei. Each generation has its own distinctives, and we need to reach each a little bit differently with the gospel. There's probably parallels to other immigrant cultures.
Mm-hmm. I think for the most part, it's Asian Americans have assimilated fast, and they take on I don't want to unnecessarily use loaded language, but I don't know what else to say it, like the majority culture. I was going to say dominant culture. That's from my Marxist undergrad education. So anyway, the majority culture, they take on the values of the majority culture right away. And so I don't see, like, in the context of discrimination, I think the groups huddle together more. And so for certain ethnic leaders, it's almost like they're hunting for persecution for Asians. And to be sure, there's definitely that for sure. But I don't think it's a dominant enough experience to really carve out Asian American second generation or third generation into something so distinctive that a unique evangelistic or ministry model would be appropriate for them. I think what we found is just a simple gospel, just the simple primary colors of the gospel is what everybody needs. And we're not finding that we're shaping it or coloring it in any way, at least not intentionally. And it doesn't seem like there's any formula that works. It's so everything from, the food to, that vague word vibe. It's really more of a generational vibe with the Asians. They tend to be, kind of hipster and kind of with it. They're not any more marginalized or feel themselves to be very foreign or alien. So on the whole, I don't think there's a distinctive approach toward that generation that we've needed to adopt or even discovered. I just don't think there is any.
That's good. That's good. I was interested in I mean, we want to just hear what you guys are doing, your strategy, but I was looking up what's going on online with Grace Point, and I saw a really interesting thing that said, "Is Grace Point a cult?" And then so I clicked on it, and you guys had put it up, and it was an entree into your website. That was really very, very clever. I was very impressed with that.
Well, it was an autocomplete on Google, and so we have a lot of. I mean, we're always soul searching about the wake of our ministry, and we are always trying to be kind of aware of online criticism, and so we thought. I mean, we were advised not to engage online criticism if it's anonymous, and it's a little bit of like airing our dirty laundry for the world to see. And so, but we wanted our voice there, and we wanted to just say, hey, like if you please talk to us, please engage us. And so that was that effort.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I find that very, very innovative. Actually, I think like a lot of times. It's easy to steer away from criticism, or it's easy to steer away from feedback, but to lend yourselves to leveraging the questions people are asking, I think is genius, and which I think is another question I have, knowing that we're still in the middle of a pandemic in some places, and I noticed that there's a heavy online presence that you have. So what have you learned as a leader when it comes to leveraging technology so that the next generation, hears the gospel, receives the gospel, and ultimately gets on that pathway toward disciple making? What are you doing to leverage? Yeah, what have you learned?
Man, I've learned not to make blanket statements about technology. I'm a little bit of a Luddite, and I think the Luddites were onto something when they went in and started destroying machines. So I was an early adopter. I had the U.S. robotics Palm Pilot, and remember that, and learned how to write in that weird thing, and then I got off that and took a hard turn away from that kind of technology for myself. So I don't have Twitter. I don't have any of those things. I have a flip phone. And so I used to get cranky about online ministry because we're all about Acts 2. We're all about face-to-face and in each other's homes. We're really all about homes. Open your homes and just show lost people and show young college students that a happy home is one of the fruits of gospel living. And so we're all about face-to-face. And then this happened. And I think more than some of those lifestyle values, I think was gospel values. And so we took a very quick pivot, and we have a lot of tech people at our church, so we're able to pull it off fast. And now where we are is we're trying to learn on as we go, but it's definitely not going away. We've experienced people opening up online in ways far beyond what we experience face to face. We're getting a lot of fruitful mentoring and evangelistic Bible studies going. So we feel like, man, we better be careful not to pivot back to just the way things were. Like this online thing, we have to staff for it and we have to keep that going. And I feel pretty convicted about that. As for getting traction and effectiveness, we're just starting, we're novices. So we're trying to learn, get good content out there. But we think that for us, because we are on so many campuses, it'll also feed off of each other as well, I think.
You know, even for those of you who are watching or you know, are going to catch the replay, what we're really learning about Ed Kang and Grace Point is the story behind what God's doing there, but then also he's doing something pretty special when it comes to the next generation. I want us to capture what he said. Number one, technology is not going away. It really isn't. In fact, if we look at the next generation, they are in spaces, you know, marketing 101 is don't sell where there's no audience. And not only don't sell where there's no audience, don't sell where there is no demand for what you're selling. That's just dumb, right? And so we have to realize that it's not going away. But another thing that Ed said is like we have to continue to learning, you know, about technology. Where is it pivoting to? What platforms are people on, etc. But then also, I hope you caught what he said. He said that we have a lot of tech people in our congregation. And when COVID hit and every church had to pivot, all of a sudden us professionals became the novices. And then those who were the professionals in our congregations became the heroes in our churches. Yeah. And I love it because I bet, Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, those people have come to life in your church.
Oh yeah, it's the revenge of the nerds, man. It's like they are so in demand and they feel so fulfilled. And then the artists, the ones who can draw and paint and put stuff online, and it's been exciting to see them deployed with their gifts in a way that face-to-face ministry doesn't, because face-to-face ministry actually favors the social, the attractive, the winsome, and you know, and these guys are putting out really, really good material online that I think will be a resource for our church for a long time to come.
Yeah, that is so powerful. Now, Ed, you said we're all about Acts 2. Mm-hmm. Tell us how that vision, that ethos has impacted your church and then the communities that you're serving.
You know, it's not like we discovered Acts 2. What we were was a bunch of college students trying to love each other. And then I was one of the fewer, you know, guys, a couple of years out of college with some money to spare, you know, and just discovered that I just wanted to feed them, you know, it's just table fellowship. It's so universal. And then something about the college campus gives you the dailiness that Acts 2 describes. Daily, they were gathering together in each other's homes. And there's something very flattening about the college experience where you can be from whatever background. Everybody has about the same amount of stuff. Everybody lives in a tiny dorm room. So the economic disparities or background disparities are muted. I mean, they're there, but they're muted. And you're able to relate to each other as freshmen, as sophomores, or whatever. And so there's that. So the college campus gives you sort of the ideal infrastructure on which to overlay discipleship. And lo and behold, you've got an Acts 2 community with dailiness and sharing everything. And everybody's stressed and pulling all-nighters because they procrastinated. And that forges relationships. And then when you put discipleship and Christian camaraderie on top of it, then one day we realize, oh my goodness, we have something really special. Let's not grow up, man. Let's not grow out of this. Let's not go our separate ways. Why do that? We know how that goes. You know, one of you goes to New York, one of you goes to LA, one of you goes to San Francisco, and it's like everybody scatters. Like, why do that when we have something so joyful? And so I think the first round of graduates who didn't leave, but intentionally stayed around and got forged together. That was the beginning of, and then we sort of looked back and we said, wait a minute, we're reading this magical description of the Acts 2 church, and we're not that far. We're not that far from it. I mean, we live this way. And so we thought, hey, maybe this is something we have to duplicate. And because there was such joy in that life, I mean, it's fun. It is fun to do life together with people who decide like, okay, we're going to simplify our lives. We're not going to go for, accumulation and career ladder climbing. We're gonna stay together, and we're gonna be happy together and raise children together. And so when we started to do that, then the joy of that gave us the motivation to, I can see us like moving together in a group of friends and duplicating this at another campus. And the campus is just the beginning, but really what we're counting, or what we're shooting for, is the church 5 years after the plant.
Yeah.
When the first graduates start staying and rooting themselves in the ministry on that campus and with each other to be that Acts 2 community, then the flywheel gets going.
Wow.
So what would you say to the rest of us, that we don't have the unifying factor of campus life, but we recognize the validity of what you're saying, and the fact that Acts 2 probably is the archetype of what the church is supposed to look like? Just any advice that you would pass along to us. And then I have a secondary question. How has technology fitted itself into the Acts 2 experience? Because for you folks, it obviously.
Yeah. So to the first advice, oh my gosh, I don't know. Like, if you're considering planting a church in some city, please consider a campus. We're at all these campuses. The fact is, you're going to reach how many you're going to reach, what you're capable of. Just because a campus is big doesn't mean. So I'm always challenging people, look, come to one of our campuses, one of our UCs, one of our big Midwestern campuses. Will help you set up shop. And like, we need more church-based collegiate ministry. And not to denigrate what Cru or InterVarsity or the parachurches are doing, but that has its limit. And we've seen that the best way to do collegiate ministry perhaps is through church and planting for that purpose, and not getting distracted with others. And you just wait 4 or 5 years, and you're gonna have the greatest ownership, people who have deep stakes in your ministry, and during those 4 years, and of course they eat more than they put into the offering bag, so the financial piece of it is a little bit challenging for sure. But of course that's a high bar in terms of like trying to tackle that. But if you can, I'd seriously ask you to consider that, and love to host anybody who wants to come and visit as well. My email is basically edkang@gmail.com. So it's my name @gmail.com. The other advice I would have for the church at large, I'm going to say something grandiose, like the church in America. As a bicultural person and with an Asian background, one thing I discover about the cultural blindness of Americans, especially American Western males, is that is this individualism. And I know enough ink has been spilled talking about that, but a church planting as an individualistic, heroic effort to go there, and like it's the hero's journey, you go there and you slay the dragon, and I just don't think that's been working out. And the model of church planting that we've experienced is our leaders don't have great leadership. They're not very charismatic. They just love people and know how to create some community around themselves and in their homes. And all they're doing is, hey, let's go and do this on a campus and love some college students. I think church, I mean, it's getting, I don't need to say this hardly to this audience, like it's getting harder and harder. You know, the same bag of tricks are not returning the same results anymore. And the prospect of, you know, one church, one like talented church planter going out there and pulling this off still happens, but that can't be our model. I think that's to be celebrated, but that's a striking individual that probably is gifted in multiple ways. Church planting has got to be like it can't have such a high bar, and I think a more communal, more Acts 2 approach where we already love each other, we're already a church. Let's just then intentionally go and duplicate this somewhere else. I think that's a model of church planting that I think really deserves to be looked at, whether that happens in a collegiate context or not.
That's good. Now, you know, as you're talking, I'm thinking about what we do to so many people. I have a personal conviction that the guy who's the extremely gifted, you know, helicopter into some location and boom, there's a couple thousand people there, probably has an apostolic gift. And a lot of the people who are planting churches have a pastoral gift or a teaching gift or something else. And so we kind of put everybody into this little mold, and you have to try to imitate this person and hope for those kind of results, which discourages an awful lot of people. And what you're saying about community and a culture of community is it's pretty easy to adapt that to wherever you are. And when we started so many years ago, it was my wife and I alone. That's not a good idea. And we would have friends for 2 hours on Sundays, and then we were alone during those first few months. It was very harsh. And then the Lord sent 3 little pockets of people into our church. This one, so when we're about 80 to 90 people, there's really 4 groups of 20. And I looked at it as First Corinthians, you know, you're all divided, and those guys, you know, I'm supposed to be the leader here. Why are those guys seen as leaders? And, you know, and I resented it and felt like the Lord really took me to the woodshed over that and said that he had sent those people. And my role was to become a spiritual father in their life and then let them be the fathers to the rest of the people in the church. And so I was actually rejecting the community, rejecting the help that he had sent along. And once I was willing to humble myself a little bit, things began to happen. And then I really strongly identify with what you said about not having a lot of charismatic leaders. We have a few of those that have come out of the years of experience. I'm not one of those. But in a way, they become almost, and I don't want to take away from them because I love them and I appreciate what they do, but they become almost a threat to everybody else. Because it's like, oh, now I need to emulate Mike's success or something like that. And there's just room for a whole lot more of us in ministry than I think that our structures have made room for. Talk to us a little bit about how you've bridged into, during the COVID thing particularly, but utilizing technology. You referenced it earlier, but how because of the pushback I get, which I don't believe in, is, well, you can't be relational over Zoom, and everybody's got Zoom fatigue and all that. But the churches I see that are thriving are now hybrids, where they're beginning to meet personally, but in face to face. But they're really utilizing Zoom in an Acts 2 fashion. Kind of speak into that.
Yeah, you know, I get Zoom fatigue as well. I get it in, not that I have Zoom fatigue, but I understand that people experience that. And that's because I think work and everything and school is turned into Zoom, but I think a lot of it's what you do on Zoom. You know, it's like, you know, if I'm FaceTiming my grandson, that doesn't feel fatiguing at all. So I don't know if everybody knows the story of Alpha. I mean, Alpha is like all about in the home and face to face, and yet when they had to go online, it exploded. So I think those are kind of too quick of a way to dismiss online. I think it's challenging. I think it's exciting. I think there's an opportunity there. I think the church is too late on it. And I think if the pandemic would wake us up to this new reality, I think we have to face it. I mean, the church has always been on the cutting edge of technology, you know, the printing press and on and on. And so I don't think it's either or. And I think whenever people put these dichotomies, you feel like, oh, if I'm for online ministry, then I must not be for in-person. Like, no, it's both. And I think it's crazy for us, especially if we're anguishing about the numbers of nuns rising among Gen Z. Like, we have to engage them. And I think there's probably an insecurity there, a generational insecurity. But what I find is that the online stuff is ultimately something that's fairly easy to learn. And then the content that you deliver and the engagement that's possible online just is the same as in person. You have to be real, and it's not like old people are not welcome online, and it's not like leaders have nothing to do online. I think it's a cross-cultural thing, if you're not in it, that you have to learn. But we're trying to learn fast, and I don't think it's optional. I mean, we have to, or we're going to become very irrelevant.
That's really good.
Hey Ed, can you speak to when you talk about establishing, you know, Acts 2 communities on campuses? Can you walk us through the process of that? So maybe when a person first comes to Christ, and they start connecting with your community and the church community, and they start to sense a call. Like, walk us through how someone would ultimately emerge into that type of leadership.
Okay, so two parts of that question, I think, like sort of how we get planted, and then sort of the pathway to develop leaders. So the how part of it is somewhat evolving always, but the formula, like, you know, as much as the world has changed, there's something about the college campus that has not. And we're always thinking about what if it suddenly does, and we think about those things. But so far, they're present in a very geographically defined, like you run into them. I mean, they're there. And they're there for 4 years, and they still show up, and they're looking for friends, and they're looking for a cause to join, and they're asking fundamental questions. So in some ways, the college campuses have stayed pretty stable in terms of some of those patterns. And so when we show up as yet another group recruiting freshmen to their thing, whatever their thing might be, their cause, their frat, their club, and it just starts from there. Hey, get to know us. You know, we have a collegiate focused Sunday service. So those are some of the ways. Apologetics, doing special talks on campus and tackling some of those questions. That's another tool that we use a lot. In terms of a freshman entering the door and turning into a church planter, I've tried to understand our own process. We don't really, you know, we're not as systematic as some other churches that can kind of pull out a flow chart at this point. I think it's culture. It's sort of well, it's at a point where guys, a couple of years out of college, all are thinking about wanting to go on a church plant. So this latest round, 2021, we're at 19 cities existing right now, and each of these cities, some of them a couple of campuses, and we're doing 12 new in 2021. So all of the teams have been formed, and they're itching to go, and it's 5 campuses in the Midwest and 7 campuses from New England down to Philly. And it's kind of odd, but I'm at a point where I need to sort of comfort the ones who want to go. You know, they have FOMO, and it's like, hey, we got to hold on to the fort too. You know, there's like a lot of good work here too. So the value and the culture is me and my friends, I want to go plant a church somewhere. Now, because it's sort of in the culture and in the language, and there isn't a program. We don't have a very, we don't have a vetting process for who gets to be on a church plant team, and who gets to lead a church plant team is whoever is leading right now. And our structure changes a lot. Sometimes we're in class structure. There's a freshman class, sophomore class leader. And then sometimes we'll just do what we call home groups, which is, you know, a little bit larger than like your cell ministry or small group, maybe 20, 30 people groups. Whoever is leading in that capacity will then just go to another city, another campus, and lead in that similar capacity. And each team is maybe a dozen or so. I think under 10 would be considered a pretty small team, and over 15 would be considered a large team. And they'd go mix of young couples and singles, and people in their 30s with little toddlers, and they'll get jobs in a new place. And it's predominantly bivocational, the people who are going, so they'll get jobs there. The pipeline isn't so defined, and stages aren't defined, but it's sort of a natural outgrowth. Like, we don't have such a driven church planting like goal, you know, like want to reach like 100 campuses by, you know, we're not that systematic. What it is I just feel like, as part of discipleship, because I think in the typical church setting, like when you have somebody become a Christian, what's next for them? You know, well, I guess, you know, you need to know your Bible. Okay, so I've read the Bible a couple of times. Like, what's next for me? And it's the volunteer concept, right? Like, okay, you help us run this big enterprise called our church by contributing small bits of time that, you know, somebody's going to piece together. And so no wonder, like, we're so anxious to develop some theology of work, because like, where else are you going to glorify God? I guess through your work, because that's where you are 40, 60, 80 hours a week. Whereas the way I look at it, the next stage in discipleship is you have to make disciples. You have to go and reach some lost people, and you need to love them, and you need to show them how to mature in Christ. And then you need to keep doing that. And then what's the next stage? Well, let's like, we're kind of saturated here, and then we have more workers than we know what to do with. So why don't you go? Because if every one of your convert becomes somebody who wants to make disciples, right? There's going to be a point at which you're not bringing in enough people for everybody to disciple. And okay, so let's go get sent. And we sort of duplicate the book of Acts story. And so for me, church planting is not the ultimate goal. It's it's the outcome of the next stage in discipleship. Otherwise, what are we asking of our guys who are getting discipled? Is like, eventually you're just going to sit there and kind of help me become a more successful audience church. So I want to take them seriously. I want to respect them. And we don't have we happen to be Southern Baptists. And one of the things I appreciate about our tribe is we don't have huge requirements for people to go to seminary and get ordained before they can do stuff. And I think that's made us agile, because today's day and age, people don't care about your credentials. They care about, like, are you adding value? Are you, like, do you have the competency? And so I think guys who are leading at home, you know, doing exactly what they need to be doing out there, I think they have a proven track record. And so that's sort of our path. So we have a lot of eager people and not enough really good leaders, but I think the eager people going out together and kind of figuring it out is sort of our approach.
You know, Ed, this is a very refreshing conversation.
Yes.
Because you just described what I've lived most of my life. But as I'm listening to you, I get the sense that you probably doubled down a little more on disciple making than we ever did. We thought we did, but when I listen to you, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm in awe of this. And I think I would like to come and visit. I just would like to learn. But as the other thing that strikes me is pretty incredible is that you have 12 churches on deck at one time. And the conflict that I feel when I try to express myself and what we've done is I always feel like I'm bumping up against the listeners, the pastors who would like to plant churches, need for some sort of a system. And we didn't have a system, we made a culture. But you've described a culture, but your culture seems to be more productive than mine. And as I'm hearing it, I think that you probably were a little more effective in really teaching everyone. We thought we did, but looking back, I can see all the holes in what I did. Everybody can, the weaknesses, but the strength of the bivocational. We slowed ourselves down by trying to raise a lot of money. We were trying to start mid-sized churches. We're looking for 150 to 200 people in whatever city we went to, and then we'd write a pretty big budget, and not the $250,000 that I'm hearing flashed around today, but a pretty big budget that would include a full-time salary. And we didn't really take advantage of the bivocational piece. You're working with people who are university graduates, in many cases, top-level universities. So their job demands are pretty high. But I get the feeling that the community takes up for the busyness in people's lives.
Yeah. So I'm going to say something like really probably controversial and provocative, but
good, we love it.
I think the word careerism is a word we should use more. It's an idolatry, and to think that I know where this comes from. I mean, I can nerd out about this, from the reformers, and they were living in Christendom and they didn't have an idea of evangelism or disciple making. They were trying to, break down the orthodoxy of the priesthood, and so they ended up saying something brilliant, like, the street sweeper at his broom is doing something as sacred as the priest at his whatever. And there's truth in that for sure. I don't want to denigrate the hard work of just ordinary people working, and that glorifies God. But so does chewing food glorify God. I can do everything to the glory of God. So when you've said, hey, that glorifies God, at the end of the day, you haven't said much. Like, you've said a lot, but you need to say more than that. You can't end there. Okay, we're glorifying God, but what about the fall? What about the lost people? What about the mission? What kind of time are we in? Are we in a period of urgency? Harvest is plentiful, workers are few. Well, that sounds like an emergency. I mean, if that happens in a nation, they mobilize the army to harvest because they don't want the harvest to go to rot. And so we make no apologies for putting career on the second burner. It's not our priority. I say that you better not be the lamest guy on your team at work. Then you got to downgrade your work so that you can be like one of the best without it killing you, right? So I mean, when I was a lawyer and I was about burning out, I took a $20,000 pay cut. This was back in the days when I was young in late 20s, and I got by on not a lot of sleep, but still I decided, okay, I'm going to take a lower level job because I was doing pretty high level legal work. I took a $20,000 pay cut and did, real estate law for a real estate developing company. I went in-house, as we say in law, and that gave me a 9-to-5 job. So it's possible for you to intentionally dial that down because you have your hands on that dial, and everybody thinks you got to dial that to the max and then see how much time you have left. Well, we dial that down to a moderate level where we can be good, valuable workers. We don't believe in stealing from the employer, right? You got to put in good, solid work, but then not be so stressed out and be so consumed by it that you can't engage in meaningful ministry, And the vast majority of our world, they just get so burnt out by just how difficult modern day life is, frankly, that church is this sort of therapeutic place you come to get healed and to, oh, God loves you and you're okay. And then you go, oh, thank you, Jesus. I get to go do it all over again. But that's our choice. That's totally our choice. And because we start early, before bad habits get in there, because, college students are brave, they could, their parents pay for their tuition and they get financial aid and they could talk a brave talk about how they're not going to get materialistic. Well, there's value in that kind of radical talk if you then don't make some serious mistakes early on and say, oh, okay, so that's how my life is going to look like. And so the early decisions about career and job and mortgage are made in light of the larger sort of sense of identity that I'm to be a minister, I'm to be about kingdom work.
Another thing that I'm hearing you say, because when you mentioned that about those brave statements and the idealism of youth, we were looking for 30-year-olds to go out and plant churches. I think you're tapping into a vein that is extremely a rich seam in terms of mining what the Lord has built into his family. It's very exciting. The youthfulness of the people you're sending out. At 25, you have a lot less encumbrances than you do at 30.
Yeah, we do actually, there isn't an age limit or anything that we've developed, but definitely our team leads are in their 30s. Like the youngest guys are 30 going out this year. Okay. So they have, because I think it just takes that long for them to get really tested in the context of ministry, but the vast majority of the team members would be in their mid-20s.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a question in the audience about, the Acts 2 philosophy, the Acts 2 ethos, and how you maintain that culture without allowing the Sunday driven experience to be the central picture. Like, how do you make sure that the Acts 2 culture, doing life together, disciple making, outcome being church planting, how do you make that stay the main thing without being given into that Sunday morning event driven kind of consumerism deal that we have going on here in the United States?
I don't know. Because I've never fought that battle. I feel spoiled. I feel like any pastor I meet deals with issues that like would require character maturity that I admire, because those battles have to be fought. We just accidentally discovered college ministry and church life overlapping 100%. We didn't have families come, once you're a collegiate thing, families don't feel comfortable, they don't come. And then, but now we have, grandparents in our congregation, but they all have that collegiate experience that forged us together. And so we have 50-year-olds who still, their heartbeat is college ministry. We got to win the campus. So we've never had to make that shift or fight for that shift. It was just there from the beginning. Campus life is all about, small group, hanging out, kind of spontaneously running into each other, doing daily devotions together. So much of our Christian life was just outside, and Sunday, like, oh yeah, we should do what every other Christian has done. We should follow that tradition and meet for Sunday worship service. But, not that we would characterize it that way. I think a lot of us would consider that like non-negotiable, but it hasn't been like this big thing that defines our ministry. And so we haven't put in like tremendous effort in the production of Sunday service either, because it's just not that definitive or important for us.
Because if I'm hearing you, the priorities are clear from the jump, that it's win the campus. And it's so interesting as I hear you talk. about the daily rhythms, the proximity, that there's this ideal infrastructure, there's the sharing, they're running into it. It's similar to prison, because I spent 8 years in prison on a prison campus, right? And so we're together every day. We're breaking bread. It's like Acts 2 for real. Like we're breaking bread. It was, and so when I got out of prison and I went to a church, it was foreign to me. I mean, it was like foreign, and I'm thinking like, okay, who's the dude in the suit with two bodyguards at the front? Like, who is this guy? And can I meet with him? And it was like, no, you can't meet with him. And who's the people that tell me where I can sit? Like, what in the world is this? You know what I mean? And it was like two different worlds.
Yeah.
And so I understand the proximity and the value for mission. And it was like in those prison days of being in that prison campus, the exponential growth in me, because of the proximity with seasoned Christ followers. I had this guy who was kind of one of the early guys who discipled me. His name was Clint. And Clint has a life plus 60 sentence. And he has chalked his mission up to being a missionary for the rest of his life. He'd say it that way, that I'm a missionary doing life. And this is my mission field for the rest of my life. And to see the amount of disciples that he's made and where they are today on this side of heaven is amazing. And so I just see those similarities. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. Tell us, before we land, Ed, can you tell us maybe a cool story of like what God is doing through this ministry that would encourage the hearts of people watching?
In 2017, we started in 5 cities, 7 campuses from Virginia down to North Carolina. And the number of salvations, first time salvations, people who are atheists, who are or non-Christian church kids who just biding their time until college, and they were gonna jump out of church and go headlong into the world, and ran into us. And this is the year that the first crop are graduating, because that was 2017. And out of them, we have a program called the CPI program, Church Planting Intern Program, where new graduates from college can volunteer for 1 year, and we give them subsistence stipend, and they all live together and help launch new church plants. And we haven't done that every year, but we did it this year. And out of our East Coast church plants, I think more than 10 of the seniors volunteered for this. And they're putting their career and everything on hold for a year, saying, I remember those guys that came out from California, and if it weren't for them, I wouldn't be saved. And my eternity has been altered. And so I want to do what they did on these new campuses. So, yeah, I mean, that comforts me. Something's working right, you know.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, and I see a question in the chat. Do these church plants typically own facilities? The answer is no. I think facilities ruin your Acts 2 dynamic. And we've had facilities, and then we notice everything moving to those facilities. If you've got a facility, you want to use it. Just like guys, you know, when they buy a new power tool, like they had no plans to do anything except, now that I have this power tool, I got to go out and cut something. Like if you have a facility, it's too tempting of a tool, and you want to fill your facility. So we try, like we have some facilities, we try really hard to not rely on facilities. We do, you know, we go searching for venues, whoever will have us. But one thing cool that we do is we try to get retreat sites or getaway homes in some place out in nature that's beautiful, because I think the college students really need that to get away from their screens and to have an extended time, you know, hopefully somewhere where the cell phone reception isn't good, so that they're spending. And we realized like a weekend trip will lower barriers and get people to open up. And people, I think, need that kind of time. So we do own these cool homes in beautiful spots. So that's one thing. And if I might just say this, since we're trying to land the plane here, I know that you can sort of take my story as an interesting story that's very particular, and it is. I mean, everybody's story is particular, but it's not necessarily an ethnic story or an Asian story or even a collegiate story. It is all of those, for sure. It's all of those. But I think there are things about our particular story from which generalizations can be made. And I think because the world is rapidly changing and souring on Christianity, for sure, these weird things that that characterize our churches, like the dude in the suit and stuff. There are a lot of really strange things that we do just out of tradition and maybe that's a cost we could have borne before, but that's not a cost we can bear anymore. And because we're in this weird collegiate context, I think we had permission to be iconoclastic and like kind of just invent a simple way to do church. But now I think that's not just a good idea. It's like that's the only way we're going to survive. We can't bear these costs that we're imposing on ourselves, such as all these requirements before you can be a church plant, or like one way to do church planting with a big launch service, and all of these sort of fixed ideas that we have. I think we have to get a lot more nimble and kind of discover some evolutionary advantage where a lot of people are doing nimble things, and then maybe we discover something that can scale. And so that's where we are at a church. We don't think we figured out collegiate ministry because the environment's changing rapidly. And so I just think being overburdened by all of these things is really slowing us down, and we really can't afford that.
Well, Ed, man, it's been, I always sit in amazement as I land the plane in conversations like this, because I always leave feeling like, man, I need 2 or 3 more hours with Ed and Ralph. And I just always feel that way, man. So thank you for, man, just sharing your heart and sharing your story. I'm watching as the young fella in the group. I'm watching, man, and I'm inspired by what God is doing through y'all, and how that might even alter the way that I lead and so forth. So thank you so much, Ed, for spending time, you and Ralph, on your vacation. I am less spiritual than either one of y'all because I'm going on vacation next month, and Exponential will not hear a peep from me.
Good idea.
But I will say this, speaking of next month, May 19th, Exponential is hosting the Reset Summit. It's going to be an amazing opportunity for leaders to get together virtually to learn how we are navigating navigating being church leaders in a post-pandemic kind of post-COVID world. So go to multiplication.org if you're watching or catching a replay. Gather some people together, gather your team together, and sign up and allow God to use yet another convening to spur inspiration and learning and equipping. So thank you guys for joining us on Practical Multiplication, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Nice meeting you guys.